Uh, Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We are in the Qualitative Research and Critical Accounting conference here today with Professor Carlos Larrinaga, that is a professor of financial economics and accounting at the University of Burgos. He's also a senior associate researcher at the University of St. Andrews. He was a professor at the University of Seville, where he obtained the doctorate in 1995, and at the University of Carlos III of Madrid. His research interests revolve around the role of companies in sustainable development, with special attention to the importance of transparency and corporate responsibility. In this field, he coordinated and participated in the numerous national and international research projects. He published his research in some of the most prestigious journals in the field, including AOS, AAAJ, CPA, and EAR. He's currently associate editor of European Accounting Review. And today he will bring to us a view of his perspective about the globalization of research and knowledge, and discuss the positive and negative consequences of the Latin American critical research. And I really am very curious about what he will tell us about our research down here in Latin America and South America. Please, Professor, be free to make your presentation as you wish. Thank you for your participation here with us.
Thank you very much, Andre. I would like to thank the organizers of the Third Qualitative Research and Critical Accounting Conference for inviting me to do this presentation. With this presentation, I would like to be a little bit provocative, and maybe I think it's a bit too risky for me to talk about the integration of critical accounting research, Latin American critical accounting research in international accounting research. But I would like to speak a little bit about some reflections. It's something that I need to talk about, to think and to study a little bit more. And have a little bit of empirical knowledge, and it is out of this empirical knowledge that those reflections, come. So I didn't know how to call this presentation, so I used this title that you have here, and I think that this is a good way to think about the topic I want to develop: the Odyssey and Siren's song, internationalizing Latin American critical accounting research among equals. Because I think that this title tells something about how the process of research internationalization is experienced in peripheral countries. And so I will try to develop this idea. And for this presentation, I'll draw on Bourdieu's notion of academic fields, and also on ideas about the coloniality and epistemologies of the South. In particular, those ideas about the epistemologies of the South they came from my work together with Mauricio Gomez Villegas. So I thank Mauricio for introducing me in those ideas. And I want to start my presentation. So next slide, please. with passage of the Odyssey, when the siren is saying, "Come here, renowned Ulysses, honor the Achaean name, and listen to our two voices. No one ever sailed past us without staying to hear the enchanting sweetness of our song. And he who listens will go on his way not only charmed, but wiser." I repeat, wiser. "For we know all the ills that the gods laid upon the Argives and Trojans before Troy, and can tell you everything that is going to happen over the whole world." So the sirens are enchanting because they know everything. So poor sailors, they are attracted to their song and superior knowledge. The only thing is that once they are lured, they lose everything. So what did Circe advise Ulysses? She said that he could, enjoy, have the pleasure of listening the siren, but only as far as he was tied on a cross piece halfway up the mast. So, this is what I'm proposing here in this with this presentation. So I will next slide, please. I will structure my presentation in those ideas. So we'll talk a little bit about the globalization of knowledge and research. Then I will talk a little bit about the positive consequences of the internationalizing Latin American critical accounting research, but also about the difficulties on a first level, the difficulties of access, and on a second level, the consequences in terms of epistemological inequity of this internationalization. So next slide, please. This is a little bit of the outline of the evolution of research worldwide. So this shows an increasing number of publications worldwide. There is an increasing number of researchers, institutions that are demanding and measuring publications output, and therefore publications. And this analysis is provided by Clarivate Analytics in 2018, and it shows that publications are increasing by 2.6% yearly, and publications have multiplied fourfold since 1980. But there is more to say about this chart. This is the official story about science, the one that is in the radar of the academic and scientific institutions. But it only includes publications that are in the Web of Science. We know that there is much research that is not conducted in the journals that are covered in this database. It doesn't include much of the research that is carried out outside the margins, in other forms of doing research, in books, in developing countries, in other languages. We also know that there is a lot of activity in the so-called open access, but also in the predatory journals. And finally, this chart speaks about the globalization. It's the research that is published all around the world, and it purports to measure worldwide academic research. So next slide, please. So this is the globalization of knowledge and research. What I tried to show in the previous slide is that research is increasingly globalized. The technical frontiers for research and knowledge are disappearing. Now we are increasingly aware of research databases, journal rankings, impact factors, age indexes, and so on. And this is true for Brazil, for China, for Colombia, for Spain, for the United States, for every country. And because the technical frontiers are disappearing, there is a trend towards uniformity and standardization of research. Different institutions are pushing researchers from different regions to publish research in what appears to be, the legitimate media. I recommend, by the way, in this regard, a paper that was published in 2019 in the European Accounting Review that is called Desingularization and Dequalification of Accounting Research. It was authored by Picard, Durocher, and Gendron. So these technical frontiers for the globalization of research and knowledge are disappearing, but not epistemological and cognitive frontiers. So we are witnessing an integration and standardization of research carried out from different cultures and ways of seeing the world. So this is a little bit the situation, and this is the situation I want to explore with some ideas. So next slide, please. So I will talk a little bit about the positive consequences, as I said, and I will also talk about the problems at two levels. Problems at the level of access, at the first level, and at the second level, I will also talk about the problems in terms of the consequences that the integration of critical accounting research, but not only critical accounting research in general, in the international intellectual fields. So next slide, please. In terms of positive consequences of the integration of the global integration of research. These are some positive consequences that came to my mind, but probably you can think in order. So the first, not reinventing the wheel. I mean, there are so many people investigating similar issues around the globe that it's useful to, draw on their ideas and exchange with them our results. So this is a positive consequence, I think. Another positive consequence is, in my view, in particular for the critical accounting project, I think that the critical accounting project in accounting is only possible to the extent that Southern perspectives are considered. So I mean, it's not just, many people think, and this movement and this conference is part of this, I think, that critical movements are more likely to emerge from Southern countries because Southern countries are younger and have also many of the problems that, of course, are present also in the North, but I think that they are more visible and more acute because they are younger, like poverty, immigration, etc., ecological problems, etc. Another positive effect of the integration, the global integration of accounting research is what we can learn from traveling across cultures. And I like very much this quote from Umberto Eco. The language of Europe is translation. I like this idea that by translating, we can learn a lot about the different cultures. That by being aware of differences, we can learn about ourselves, and this is the issue. So I think that this is another positive effect of the globalization of research. But also, I mean, I come from Spain, but Spain to me is not so different from Latin America with regard to the globalization of accounting research. We share some cultural traits, and I think that that globalization has brought with it in academia, in particular for accounting research, discipline and openness to new ideas. I have the experience in Spanish academia about the authoritarian professor who is unable to learn because he knows everything from the start. And I think that the review process and all all the ways of doing research that we have learned from Anglo-Saxon publishing journals and publishing processes, it has been very positive in terms of opening to new ideas and to new perspectives. And this has provided legitimacy to new perspectives. And so we are now in accounting research, for example, in Spain, we are now we don't have any problem to investigate any perspective. And I think that this is also true for Latin America, whereas probably a few years ago, it was unthinkable to talk about accounting research and gender, to talk about accounting research and decoloniality, to talk about accounting research and ecological issues. Today, this is legitimate. And I think that this is also a positive consequence of the global integration of Latin American accounting research. Okay, so next slide, please. But I think that it's more interesting probably to talk about the difficulties. And I think that one clear difficulty that we can think of when we think about Latin American accounting research is the access to publish, to communicate the research that is carried out in Latin America. And I'm drawing on Pierre Bourdieu. Pierre Bourdieu talks about intellectual fields, and he conceives intellectual fields in terms of general fields, in terms of a struggle to occupy positions in the field determined by dispositions and capitals. The habitus enables an intellectual disposition that is distance from material necessity, and creates this intellectual disposition to conduct research. And in this struggle, actors, they also, intellectuals or researchers, they also need capital in terms of academic research or intellectual fields. The most important capitals are the cultural forms of capital. So they are necessary to engage in the intellectual competition. So, Bourdieu is a defender of the autonomy of the researcher. And this is something that I also think is, it's very important. It's capital. We need to have autonomy to conduct research. So Bourdieu suggests that in order to have autonomy to conduct research, he proposes that we need to drop all non-scientific weapons. So we have to abandon all the weapons that don't have anything to do with science. When we talk about the integration of Latin American critical accounting research, there are, I think, many non-scientific weapons that are used in the competition to occupy central positions in the intellectual field. So I can think about some of them. So first, clearly language. It has been argued that the use of the English language to evaluate and communicate research marginalizes different perspectives that are not articulated in the English language, that are articulated in other languages. And you know, this is in other words, it's an entry barrier. You know, it's very clear. It's less subtle. There are more subtle ways of you know, enacting English as an obstacle, as a weapon for you know, competing in intellectual fields. But this is very clear. Sometimes it's, you know, sometimes papers get rejected because poor English, and you know, my English is my second language, and I'm here struggling to talk in English and trying to communicate with you. And you know, this is clear a disadvantage. But is this scientific? This is the question. Other non-scientific weapons that are you know, constituting a capital for some researchers are the culture. You know, language is not just technical matter, you know, but there are so many other contextual knowledge that is important for, you know, constructing and developing research, and sometimes it's an obstacle. And then there are also specific networks of you know, academics that help to develop research. So if sometimes it is difficult. Sometimes it is difficult for Latin American researchers, non-European, non-Anglo-Saxon researchers to access those networks. Sometimes because, for example, they cannot attend conferences because they lack resources, they lack the money to attend those conferences and to subscribe the journals. So, you know, the language, culture, specific networks, resources, money, those are non-scientific weapons, and they are there, and we have to be aware of them. Next slide, please. I can help but remember Upstairs and Downstairs, a British television drama series of the 1970s that I recommend you to have a look, to think about these issues. So, yeah, you know, power is dependent on continuing with the ideas of Pierre Bourdieu. Power is dependent on, you know, symbolic capital. Symbolic capital is a way of capital, is a form of capital that consists in cognitive structures to which actors are blinded because they have been taken for granted. And symbolic capital results in symbolic violence because the dominated accepts as legitimate its own condition of domination. All forms of power require legitimation, and oftentimes economic, cultural, and other forms of capital are transformed into symbolic power to, you know, producing this symbolic violence. So the danger is that the internationalization of accounting research reproduces this symbolic violence, transforming relation of exploitation into legitimate relations. And critical accounting research must remain vigilant, must remain especially alert to whatever domination these processes produce. And critical accounting research should aim at, destroying, shattering those forms of symbolic violence. So, and this is why there are some initiatives like this conference that is trying to build bridges between, those realities. Next slide, please. And this is, for example, the case also with the special issue on critical perspectives on accounting in Spanish that was proposed a few years, a couple of years ago, I think. So this special issue is very particular because it called for papers to be submitted in Spanish, and all the review process, all the editorial letters, all the review reports, everything is conducted in Spanish. And, all the process is conducted in Spanish, so it's solving somehow the problems that authors have to access research that by writing in English, which is not our language. We have all many Latin American and I also think in Spanish scholars, we have the experience of doing research in Spanish and then using translation services to translate research in English, which is, is very complex. It's very complex. So by doing this, I think that critical perspectives on accounting is taking a step forward and trying to, consistently with the aim, with the ethos of critical perspectives on accounting, is trying to solve these problems of access that I'm talking about. The experience that we have is that Latin American and non-Anglo-Saxon authors are so desperate to publish in international journals that when we opened this possibility, we received many papers. And half of them, approximately, they were papers that were out of the scope of, critical perspectives on accounting. They didn't have anything to do with critical perspectives. So I think that this is, this is a very interesting initiative. And as I said before, another example is this conference, but still, English is also very important. We shouldn't ignore this. And at the end of the day, we need English as a lingua franca, but it's both sides. It's important. It's a medium to communicate among different cultures, but at the same time, it's an obstacle to communicate, particularly in, I think, in social sciences, is a particular important obstacle. And just before finishing this section of my presentation, just to comment that at the same time, the critical perspectives on accounting is going to publish articles that are received in Spanish. At the same time, we are seeing that many journals that were published in Spanish are only accepting papers that are received in English. So, this is very paradoxical, but I also think that this is very revealing of the current, environment in international accounting, in international environment of accounting research. Okay, so this is like the first level of problems that I'm talking about, is the problem of accessing research in English for the problems of English, culture, networks, etc. Next slide, please. But I think that there is a more difficult problem in terms of the internationalization of research that has to do with epistemological inequality. This is a second level of problem. It's a second level problem, and I recommend reading the papers of the late Eduardo Ibarra Colado. It's very, very interesting. I mean, he wrote very nice pieces. And he was talking about this renewed colonialization. He was saying that Latin American scholars are trying to make a name for themselves in international networks, but at the same time, they are uncritically absorbing the know-how of being an academic, including the theories, the culture, and the language from what he called the Anglo-Eurocentric perspective. Ibarra Colado expressed the uncomfortable senses created by the need to speak the centrist language, use its concepts, discuss its agendas, and conform to the stereotypes of the imperfect South, while keeping a polite silence on the real causes of your problems. So I think that this idea of Anglo-Eurocentric cognitive epistemic forms of coloniality is very powerful to understand what are the dangers, even when you have, or when we have accessed the international environment, the international research field. And these cognitive and epistemic forms of coloniality have an European origin, as Ibarra Colado said. So to confront this situation, there is this project that is called the Decolonial Project, that tries to extend and understand the European colonialization to include not only the colonialization that was produced, by political and military domination, but also the domination that had an epistemic and cognitive nature. So in this way, as another author, Quijano, said, coloniality is still the most general form of domination. Once colonialism, as an explicit political order, was destroyed. Also, Mignolo says that despite decolonialization, coloniality of knowledge remained in place by means of institutions like universities, museums, convents, and monasteries. This Latin American colonialization was intertwined with modernity. It was, a mutual feedback. Colonialization was possible because of modernity, and modernity was possible by colonization, because the industrial development and everything had an origin in all the resources that were extracted from the colonies. So, but this provides a singular perspective about how coloniality persists in the form of knowledge and thinking imposed by the Anglo-Eurocentric modern science, limiting the capacity of recognizing, explaining, and understanding other realities. Next slide, please. So, as I said, Latin American colonialization is intertwined with the origin, with the notion of modernity. And the second foundation of the decolonial project is a discontent with the capacity of the European critical social theory to conceive and promote emancipation in the global South. There are limitations imposed by these epistemological assumptions. I mean, for example, the critical theory that is coming from the North is compromised by the history of the North in issues like, the labor fights, the proletariat, the parties, the universities, the citizens of the metropolis, and the modern subject. As Mignolo says, the white rational and culture man, which is at odds with the Latin American reality, but many other realities. Furthermore, the epistemologies are essentially modern, and these epistemologies of the North are inseparable from the European colonialization. And on the other hand, the European critical theories, are in a way in crisis because they are not appropriately dealing with the ecological crisis, the globalization, the crisis of the left. So what can, as there is a kind of this epistemology is producing what Santos, Boaventura de Sousa Santos, call an epistemicide, is producing the impossibility of knowing by itself of the South. So this is why the coloniality movement is trying to propose alternatives. So next slide, please. And I'm talking here about the ideas of Boaventura de Sousa Santos, who talks about the epistemologies of the South. And particularly he develops this notion of the sociology of absences, which is interested in understanding how alternative ways of knowing are repressed. So we are not talking here about the access to international journals. We are talking here about how we access international journals, how we publish and how we read international journals. According to Santos, non-existence is produced whenever a certain entity is disqualified or rendered invisible, unintelligible, or discardable. Santos distinguishes 5 logics by which non-existence is produced. He talks about the logic of the ignorant, the production of the ignorant. It's this consideration of the modern science and high culture as the hallmark of rationality and legitimate knowledge. This is the strongest mode of the production of non-existence. So in a way, while the metropolis produces real knowledge, the colony only emits beliefs, opinions, intuitions, subjective understandings, the raw material for scientific inquiry, for research. So the South, the colony, is producing the raw material for for scientific, for research, while the North is producing real research. So which are the consequences that we can read in the papers, even in the critical accounting papers? We read that they ignore local knowledge, even when they address, when they research Southern realities, they ignore local knowledge. They discard authors from the South that are, trying to understand their own reality. So in this way, they are producing the South or the colony as non-existent. They are imposing topics. They are talking about, I don't know, intellectual logic, institutional logics. They are talking about topics that are interesting for the North, but that are not quite as so interesting for the South, for the realities of the South. The second way of producing non-existence is the logic of the residual, the production of the residual. So here, time is contemplated as something that is theologically aimed towards progress and development. It's like one way, only one way. Of course, the Anglo-Eurocentric perspective is on the side of civilization, which is the aspiration, which becomes the aspiration of the colonized. This perspective, as Santos explains, fails to recognize the possibility of different ways of being contemporaneous, producing the non-existence by affirming the non-possibility of being contemporaneous. And we see this in the accounting research when they are talking about IFRS convergence, when they are talking about profitability, when they are talking about, the progress. And on the one side, the Anglo-Eurocentric are just disdaining the Southern countries because they don't have the same level of development. And on the other side, the Southern countries are trying to catch up and trying to develop their practices to mimic the practices of the North. But in this way, they are denying the possibility of a different way of being contemporaneous, a different way, different alternatives, which is, by the way, something that is, I think, in the DNA of critical perspectives on accounting, is exploring alternatives. So this is important for critical perspectives on accounting. And in this way, I mean, in the papers that we received for the special issue on critical perspectives on accounting in Spanish, there were many examples of papers that were trying to, mimic the kind of research that is, was very difficult. It was very difficult to find pieces of research that are really providing or suggesting or developing alternatives. Most of the papers were, many papers, not most, but many papers, as I said before, were just mimicking the way of doing research that we can find in international Anglo-Saxon journals. There is also another way of producing non-existence is the logic of the inferior, the production of the inferior. And for Quijano, for example, this is inherent to race, inherent to colonization, inherent to coloniality, and this is producing colonized people as inferior. So this is creating a dualism by which, the Anglo-Eurocentric culture is superior, and the rest are inferior. The strong and the weak. This can be also extended to sexual distinction, racial distinction, cultural distinctions, etc., etc. And we can see this also in accounting research when Latin American or African accounting is portrayed as weak. Again, we read papers that are talking about institutional logics, are talking about culture, but by talking about institutional logics and culture and those soft terms, they are forgetting to analyze geopolitics, for example. They are forgetting very often to talk about war. They are forgetting to talk about violence, about terror. And I just mentioning one case, one researcher I know who is, doing research about environmental ecological conflicts, and he or she is not able or is afraid, is scared of doing research about ecological conflicts in his own country, and is doing research on ecological conflicts in other countries. Why? Because violence, terror, fear are important, issues that we need to. So it's not inferior. I mean, it's different. It's we cannot portray Latin America as weak. We need to think about the real context. So another way of producing non-existence is the logic of the local. So the production of the local. So Latin America is like a specific case. The universal. The universal is the Anglo-Saxon, the Euro, the Anglo-Eurocentric perspective. Is providing the universal. Latin America and Africa, Asia are just cases that we need to study. Is denying the possibility of more diversity in knowledge. The local is constructed as a particular case and is devoid of the possibility to build any credible alternative. There is again, if we read the literature on Latin America, Latin America is used as a label that encompasses everything in this region. There is no difference between different countries, and sometimes I also found even basic information about countries. So Mexico. Mexico is a country that is south of the United States and everything. You wouldn't find this information about the United States or about the UK or about France or even Spain. Why this way of expressing about one country as important as Mexico? Because the South is expressed as the local, is produced as the local. And also the final way of producing non-existence is the logic of the non-productive, is the production of the non-productive. So the production, economic growth is at the core of the way of thinking in the Anglo-Euro-centric perspective. Is unquestionable and objective, and everything is in this direction. And any other way of arranging the economy, any way like a prestige-oriented economy, for example, or any other way of thinking, any other alternative of arranging the economy is constructed as unproductive. Okay, so this next slide, please. So these are the ways of constructing the non-productive. So what I'm proposing here, because we have problems of access, but we also have we are trying to access the international research arena, the international research field. But at the same time, there are many dangers because by accessing the international research field, we can lose our culture, we can adopt other cultures, we can lose ways of seeing the world. So what I'm proposing is like Circe advised to Ulysses, is I will advise to instruct your sailors to tie you up in the mastile to resist, to enjoy the song of the sirens, but at the same time to resist and create areas for doing research that is genuinely Latin American. And this is something that, as I said before, is very difficult. One clear example is one Spanish journal, as I said before, Revista Española de Financiación y Contabilidad, that only accepts papers written in English now. I think that this very positive, and I have big hopes in the movement initiated by Critical Perspectives on Accounting on receiving papers written in Spanish. But at the same time, I think that this, there are some dangers. And next slide, please. And so I think that the critical accounting project must remain especially alert to whatever domination these processes produce. So this is why I suggest this idea that you have to instruct your sailors to tie you up on a cross piece halfway up the mast to enjoy the song, but at the same time resist. So we need to be alert to any of those projects, and I'm including here, for example, the special issue, the Critical Perspectives on Accounting special issue. I think it's very positive. I'm engaged in this process, but at the same time, we need to be a little bit alert and careful by not, producing negative effects in this process. So it's clearly producing empowerment, but at the same time, there is a risk that we need to, study. We need to conduct more research to avoid failing in a renewal of colonialism. But at the end of the day, I think that the critical accounting project is only possible. So, you see that I'm quite concerned about the dangers of the internationalization of critical accounting research. But overall, I think that the critical accounting project is only possible to the extent that Southern critical accounting produces a liberation of knowledge. But, and this is, what is interesting about this is that the Southern critical accounting research needs to produce a liberation, and this liberation of knowledge that needs to be produced in the South needs to be produced through a decolonial approach, and this decolonial approach needs to provincialize the Anglo-Eurocentric critical accounting perspective. So I think that the Latin American critical accounting project needs to develop by criticizing the whole critical accounting project, and criticizing, accounting practices, and criticizing international accounting, and criticizing the Anglo-Eurocentric perspective. So this is, next slide, please. This was my presentation. Sorry if, the ideas were a little bit rough, but as I said before, those ideas are emerging rather empirically than from careful research and study. And I'm very happy to be here. And thank you very much for being here, for listening to my presentation. And now I'm available for whatever questions you have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor, for your provocative presentation. And now, before I open to audience questions, I will invite Professor Fernanda Sauerbron, that I'm sure is scratching to speak about the presentation of the Professor Carlos Larrainaga.
Yes. Thank you, André. Thank you, Professor Larrainaga. Obrigada, professor, pela sua relevante e contundente fala. Many thanks, Professor Larrainaga, for your relevant, provocative, hard-hitting speech. My familiarity with the coloniality and the colonial literature goes back to the years 2000 when I met personally Professor Ibarra Colado. Eduardo was a personal friend of my PhD supervisor, Alex Faria. And since then, I've been reading and studying and putting myself in a reflexive position regarding my own work and the work of colleagues. So your speech certainly takes us back to the ongoing process of colonization and recolonization of Latin America that has been taking place over the 500 years. Since Colombo and the Spanish-Portuguese colonization, we have been told that we are wrong, that our people and also people that were enslaved in this space are devoid of knowledge, cultural, racial, gender knowledge, and also legacy. So certainly, your keynote refers to a process that in this forum, yesterday in a panel we had in the afternoon, we are calling colonization and recolonization, an ongoing process that is currently ongoing. So your speech also directly involves the geopolitics of global knowledge that constantly submit us from the global south and also the north to a logic of internationalization of knowledge production based on Eurocentric criteria. I would say not only Eurocentric criteria, but guided by the publishing industry. And in my view, and in some part of colleagues who are here, we are in a university power structure, an ivory tower that dominates and controls one or more epistemologies, several epistemologies. And we were discussing yesterday that we are certainly all of us operators in some way of coloniality and recoloniality, even if when we are engaging into praxis of management and managerial or accountability forms.
Mm-hmm.
So, and we must consider that we are all inhabiting business schools, scientific committees of congresses, conferences, journals, and without exclusion, we are all immersed in this geopolitics of knowledge. And I know that your presentation touched that point very interestingly. So I thank you for that. So in this scenario, I have three provocative questions to you that I think some of the questions that are presented here in the Q&A goes in that direction and others ask for more. So I'm just going to open it and then let you develop your further your thoughts on that. So first my first question is, wouldn't all academics in the South and the North be mermaids, sirens, who present or sing and chant our different epistemologies, including the decolonial one? Who are those sirens or sailors in this geopolitics? The second question, should we even be subject to learning epistemologies and epistemics on the South, from the South, with and within and paired with our colleagues from the North? Third question, in your view, this forum, QRCA, is it an effort to overcome epistemicide violence and maybe a way to re-existence? How do you see this forum? Is it a way of building bridges, gateways, dialogues between equals? Who in this geopolitics of knowledge, in your view, are the equals? Who are the sailors that should embrace each other and give hands? So this, as I said, provocative questions. Some of them are presented from colleagues in the Q&A. But I really thank you for being here. And I know it is surely a fantastic engagement having you here in our dialogue. Thank you, Professor.
Thank you very much, Fernanda. Very difficult questions. Who are the sirens and the sailors? Yeah, I think that all of us, we are in a way. I don't think that you can say that some people are the sirens and others are the sailors. I think that we are in a way, as we enter a little bit this international field, research field, we are transforming a little bit in sirens. So it's not. I wouldn't personalize this dichotomy in particular individuals. I think that in a way we, as we are between two different worlds, and by being between two different worlds, we have a little bit of the role of the siren, because we are spreading the word. We are trying to convince others that you come here and do international accounting research. So we are both of them. We are also attracted to this. So I think that the song is beautiful. The song is beautiful. So we must listen. We must enjoy the song. The thing is that we need to be tied up in the mast. We need to have some spheres to make sure that there is, in the special issue we were calling about biodiversity. I don't know if it is the right way to express it, but we need to make sure that there is a space for this biodiversity. To have space for the biodiversity, for any biodiversity, we need to be tied up to the mast. And we need to, make sure that there are spaces, different spaces. And I think I'm answering somehow the second question, learning from the North. Of course, I mean, the song is beautiful. I said before about the positive consequences. The previous alternative probably in academia, I'm talking about Spain, but I think that in some Latin American countries that I know was a little bit similar. That was, the authoritarian professor who never was wrong, and who, because he never was wrong, he couldn't learn, and he wasn't, or she. I mean, most often was he. He was not used at the process of reviewing and the possibility of getting a paper rejected because the argument was not sufficient, etc. So this is something, this discipline is something that we are learning. So my answer is the song is beautiful. We must enjoy the song. But the thing is that we need to make sure that we have spaces for developing alternatives. And what about this forum? I mean, this forum is fantastic. I mean, we are exchanging exchanging ideas, and I think that we are in the right position to make these questions, to ask ourselves about the danger of reproducing the colonialization, and we are also we are aware of this danger. My only concern is that we need to keep asking this question in this forum. But this forum is perfect. The song is beautiful. Let's enjoy the song. Okay, so this is my answer. Thank you for your question. I don't know if I answered your question.
Yes, you did. Thank you a lot. I think that my questions, this is something that we are aiming to have these reflexive practices of building bridges, having a coherent sense of who we are, where we are, from where we come from, and how can we make those connections work respecting both origins, both trajectories, and things. And our struggle here is that we are still colonized and facing the sirens and the oppressors of the mainstream. Our PhD programs has those professors that does teach the truth, the real truth of mainstream. And few PhD courses are discussing any other, no other form of epistemology. So I believe that what we have in common in our discussion here, and your speech is perfect in the sense, is that we all need to understand our positionalities from where we are coming from to where we are going, and how can we show to our PhD students, the early academics, that they are not alone. That the sirens in Latin America say, okay, you are not alone, let's dialogue, let's open space to everyone. And let's make connections with reflexive colleagues like you and others can integrate and build bridges amongst ourselves. So please, thank you a lot for your speech. I didn't know what it wouldn't come, and it was perfect, and so thank you again. I think that André has several questions from the audience. You will have at least 12, some of them connected to mine, others that are not. So thank you again. André, it's on you now.
Okay. Thank you, Fernanda. I don't know where are the questions of the audience.
You have to click on Q&A button in the bottom of the page.
Just 12.
Just 12, and some of them are in different. You have Jose Paulilo with several questions along the Q&A. So if you want, you can read Silvia Nova first, and I can make a brief summary of Jose ideas while you read and he responds.
Silvia Nova, let's see. Silvia Nova asks how to translate our context without being lost in translation, as Naoko Komori argues we usually are. How to build communities where the opportunities of translation can be seen as one of the strengths and not one of the weaknesses. We are speaking of languages and how our language barrier from, for instance, Spanish and Portuguese. That's the question of Silvanova.
Yeah. I think that what is interesting about being lost is, I mean, research is about making questions. So if playing with the words, if we are lost in translation, this is good because we have questions. We have to answer some question, and doing research is about addressing and trying to answer questions. So this is why I definitely think that translation and comparative studies and trying to understand and know other cultures is the best way to initiate the journey of research. So and I didn't get the second part of the question. Yeah, I mean, it's of course, I mean, we are lost in translation, but at the same time, it's positive. I think that translation is positive. And I love this idea from Umberto Eco, but at the same time, of course, languages are a barrier. And I developed this notion, and this is why we are in the special issue on CPA in Spanish. We are trying to overcome this barrier by allowing Latin American researchers to submit their papers in Spanish. But this is something that we need to explore even more. By the way, if anyone doesn't know that there is a special issue, I think in 2018 in AAAJ, in Accounting, Auditing, and Accountability Journal, on language and accounting research, and is developing exactly these ideas. The problems that we find when of course we have barriers to entry barriers, and at the same time we have the problem of all the contextual information that is lost in translation, which is the other side of the coin, of course, that if we just translate literally something, we lose information. But at the same time, if we are translating, if we are in the process of translating, we learn a lot because we know about this context. It is the outcome of translation that is poor because we lost all the context in the process of translation. But it is the process of translation which is interesting.
Perfect. We have, I'm going to help André because the questions are mixed here in the Q&A. José Paulilo is mentioning also las diferencias entre español en Latinoamérica. El español de Argentina, el español de Venezuela, de Colombia. Então, José Paulilo is talking about the differences in Spanish within Latin America, from Argentina, Colombia, Venezuela, and from Spain also. La idea de ideología como una trampa, como una armadilla, como as something to be defied, ideology in accounting, not only language. In this sense, he's arguing about if the university rankings is not a way of promover, sustenir, a way of promoting and sustaining inequalities in epistemological terms. He's asking about it. So if you can talk a little bit on this, please.
Yeah, of course. I mean, any of those instruments are ways of promoting inequality, and is difference, producing difference. And I will recommend you the paper I mentioned before in the European Accounting Review in 2018 about the qualification and the singularization. It is not only about producing inequality, it is also about producing standardization and producing uniformity in research. It's about, making all of us do the same type of research and destroying alternatives. Because we are all in one scale. We are all commensurate. We are all aspiring to score well in particular indicators to be in a good position in those rankings. So of course, I mean those rankings are evil, but it's producing power, of course, reproducing power, and and it's a danger for the Latin American universities, because if one Latin American university wants to score to attain a good rank in those instruments, then a good position in those rankings, then this university has to comply with all the criteria that are not criteria that were designed or devised in the South. Those are criteria that were devised and designed by Anglo-Eurocentric perspectives. In this particular case, the rankings, I think that they are more Anglo than Euro-centric. But of course, this is evil.
André, você está muted. Your mic. Okay.
Okay, there is a very interesting question of Paulino. Also asks, a ideologia não seria uma arma não científica também? The ideology would not be a scientific weapon also?
Yeah, I mean, ideology is a term that has so many meanings that I wouldn't know how to answer to this question. But I mean, the factions, the groups, of course. But the ideology in a way is also part of I lost the word, is also part of the symbolic capital, or not symbolic capital, but the symbolic violence. Symbolic violence is produced by disguising other forms of capital and taking for granted the legitimacy of this the particular actions or particular ways of thinking. So I will say that it is definitely something that is around there, but I'm not sure whether this is a non-scientific weapon, but is of course playing a very important role.
There is a question from Professor Yves Gendron. He's congratulating you for your presentation. He will risk asking one question, that is, given that a number of people in Americas are coming from Europe 200, 300 years ago or more recently, to what extent are the epistemologies of the Americas significantly different from European epistemologies? In other words, are the American epistemologies significantly autonomous from European epistemologies?
Good question. I don't, 200, 300 years ago is the time that in Europe we were, in at the peak of the Enlightenment, and the modernity was the start of of modernity, and I think that yes, I mean there was an exchange of people, but it was an unequal exchange of people because in South America and in Latin America. Uh, Latin America was the colony, but Europe was the metropolis. So and capitalism developed in Europe thanks to the resources that were extracted from the south. So yeah, I mean they had a relationship, but this relationship was an unequal relationship, was a colonial relationship, and out of this colonial model and colonialism history, we have different ways of seeing the world, and of course, the way of seeing the world has been imposed in America. So there is a dominant way of seeing the world, and a dominant epistemology, and it is the Anglo-Eurocentric perspective. This is imposed in Latin America, but it has been imposed in a process of 500 years. So, yeah, there is some exchange, but I wouldn't think in terms of, having different epistemologies because we have different populations, or we have, no, I mean, history, the weight of history is very important. And the history in those 500 years is a history of colonialism. And this colonialism has produced different epistemologies and different, ways of organizing the society in so many ways, and different cognitive systems, etc., etc. So yeah, I mean, it's not something that I thought. Is something that is important to read Quijano and to read Mignolo, Ibarra Colado and Santos and other authors to really grasp these ideas.
Yes, and Silvia Nova is highlighting to us that we should read also Shimamanda Adichie. And she's saying that she recalls us about the danger of a single history. And the question from Silvia is how can we tell our stories, our many stories, even within our local context, avoiding also the internal epistemicide? Do you have any suggestion on that way?
Yeah, I think that it's very difficult. It's a very difficult question. I will think that it is probably for you to answer this question, but I have the feeling that we need to avoid the romantic view, the idea that we need to recover something from the past or something like that. Is we need to be critical of the imposition of a particular way of, and by being critical of the imposition of a particular way of seeing the world, then we can develop alternatives. And those alternatives are maybe there, but I think that, I don't believe in romanticism.
Thank you, Professor. We have several other questions. Oh my God, I think it was really provocative. Everybody's embracing the discussion. This is fantastic. Thank you. Mary Vera Colina is saying, gracias por las reflexiones y advertencias. Thanks for the reflections and warnings. Ellas, oh my God, I have to speak in English. As they are relevant and they discusses QRCA without doubt. Mary says that her experience estamos exposed to an internal colonization de los expertos, los experts. E tenemos nos también los colonizadores internos en Latinoamérica, los investigadores que intentan reproducir la lógica supostamente decolonizada, imponiendo una única forma de pensar que pode afetar alguns alunos, alguns seguidores que estão em suas primeiras fases de carreira. Então, Mary, I'm going to translate in English. Mary is asking about how can we deal and handle the situation of internal colonizers that are supposedly proposing decolonization while they are imposing their own ways of seeing their own epistemologies to students. How can we deal with this internal dynamic? If you have any suggestion on how to manage and how to handle, how to try to reorganize our field, in which we have internal scholars that are critical, but they are colonizing minds with their own view. Latin American scholars doing this within our field.
I don't really know. I mean, the only thing that I think that it is important always to be critical, and yes, I mean, sometimes it's difficult to critique or others papers, the papers of our colleagues, for example, and but yeah, I mean, we need to be alert and to be vigilant and try to, I don't know, it's a difficult question. The only answer that comes to my mind is, be alert and try to write about those attempts.
And shows the possibilities of bridges. Okay, and the possibilities of bridges that can be made. Those students can see in position instead of dialogue. Maybe it's a way we can try to consolidate. Okay, some comments. I'm taking the lead, Andre. I'm sorry, because I think that there are some questions that are mixed here. We have a comment from Professor Vitória Zuninga. She's from Universidade Federal da Paraíba. And she's saying that we have too much to progress, to evolve. Until today, we have difficulties to find materials in Portuguese in accounting with ethnographic research, the quality of ethnographic research to show the students. And what Vitória is saying is true. We have sometimes to go to international materials because our own field doesn't have good materials, good discussions. And she's telling that it is a challenge how to develop the field, how to open minds and open dialogues without the proper materials, without things that can help us to build those bridges with students even.
Yeah, I mean, the song is beautiful. We need to enjoy the possibility of having so many people, so many interesting ideas coming from other countries. So I'm not suggesting to just focus on national literatures, on literatures on Portuguese or literatures on Spanish at all. I mean, the knowledge is in every language, and it is important to be aware of the ideas that are everywhere. What I'm critical about is when in the international literature, local perspectives are ignored and local authors are ignored, and even sometimes local knowledge is only considered as far as it has been filtered through the international literature. So I'm critical about this, but not, of course, about we need to exchange. We need to, if we don't have the proper material in Portuguese about autoethnography, then we need to ethnography. We need to go to international sources. But I think that we also have other material in Portuguese or in Spanish that we need to be aware of. And, you know, we shouldn't avoid only citing material in English. We also should try to look for ideas and for research that is written in Spanish and Portuguese, not only in accounting, but in other areas. We need to also think about, you know, for example, Paulo Freire. Paulo Freire, you know, it's very important, and it's you don't need to read it in English. You should read it in Portuguese. And,
sure.
of course.
Yeah, we are doing this. Some colleagues we are going to management or sociology or political science, other fields to find those materials and build our possibilities to open dialogue. There is, I think that questions from Angelo were addressed because he was talking about the future, the possibilities for the field, and you have addressed some of these. And there is a last comment from Sylvia in which she's saying, she starts opening a dialogue with Conceição Evaristo. It's a Brazilian writer, black women writer, that she's proposing the idea of escrevivência, sort of life written. I don't know how to translate it, as one strategy to regain our past, to recover our legacy, our ancestrality. So she proposes that even obedience is a strategy of resistance. Conceição also says that the ingenuity of enslaved people has an important role in surviving. So it is not about being romantic, but about surviving, recognizing those issues. So her question is, how do you see Black feminists and the colonial feminism? We are going to have a panel in 30 minutes on that topic. How do you see those perspectives as theoretical lenses to keep our reflexivity, as well as knowing more about our own local contextual epistemological possibilities?
I'm sorry, but I'm not an expert on this, so I think I'm not able to answer this. But I was thinking the previous questions was mentioning the the fact that she or he needed to access literature on ethnography in English because there wasn't anything in Portuguese, and now you have this notion which is beautiful, escrevidencia.
Yes.
Which is, it's autoethnography. So this is a very good example of using something which I'm not an expert, but it looks like very interesting, really, really interesting, and something that that you can use for doing research that comes from, Portuguese, Brazilian source in Portuguese.
Perfect. Yes, yes. Thank you, Professor. I think that all those issues that we have discussed here are quite relevant for the development of our field of knowledge of accounting in Brazil, and how to challenge accountability, accounting knowledge within the margins, from the margins, and to open dialogue with the global north, gaining our own spaces with our own literature. So please come every time you want to QRCA, be with us, participate with us in those engagements. This is a formal invitation, and thank you for this. I will handle the word to André now.
Oh, just I would like to thank you to attend the QRCA. I'm sure that the questions will never finish about this issue. So we have the time to finish the session. And one more time, I would like to thank you for your presentation and your kindly answers about the questions. Professor, it was a pleasure. I hope that everything goes okay for the next year for us, Spain and Brazil and the rest of the world with this virus. Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much. And I was about to attend the QRCA last year, but I had family problems and I couldn't make it. But it's really my space in Latin America. So I will definitely attend next year.
Okay.
If we can fly, otherwise online. I don't know, but. Yeah, so thank you so much for inviting me to do this presentation, and I look forward seeing you soon.
Okay. Thank you, Professor. Thank you, thank you. In the name of the organizing committee of QRCA, I thank you for being here with us, so open-minded and open to our questions and discussions. Thank you a lot. I wish you all the best in the future projects and inviting you to come to the next panel on the colonial feminism, Black feminism, and other issues in Latin America. So please be with us. Bye-bye. Thank you. Bye, André.
Bye.
Thank you to all the audience that is here also. Thank you all.
Yes.